All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something we all deal with, habits, but we're going deeper than just like the surface level.
Yeah, way past those top 10 tips lists you see everywhere.
Right, we're using James Clear's Atomic Habits as our roadmap. So get ready, because this deep dive is all about practical stuff you can use.
Absolutely. It's not just about knowing how habits work, but how to use that knowledge to actually, well, change.
Exactly. Okay, so let's kick things off with one of Clear's big ideas, the plateau of latent potential. It's this idea that we tend to quit on new habits just before, like right before we'd see results.
It's almost like we're programmed to give up at the worst possible time. Why is that?
It's wild, right? Why do we do that?
Well, our brains, they love instant gratification. We're wired for it. We want to see those results right away. And if we don't,
We lose steam, we get discouraged.
exactly. Think of it like chipping away at an iceberg, right? You chip and chip and chip, and it feels like you're getting nowhere.
But then, bam, suddenly a huge chunk breaks off, and the whole thing shifts.
Yeah, it's that sudden change. Habits are kind of like that.
Okay, so that makes sense, but how do we actually push through those moments of doubt when it feels like nothing's happening?
Well, one thing Clear suggests is to shift your focus. Instead of obsessing over the outcome, concentrate on the process itself.
Hmm. So, like, you finding satisfaction in actually doing the work, even if the results aren't visible yet.
Exactly. You've got to enjoy showing up every day. And that's where this whole identity thing comes in. Clear's really big on that.
Right, this is, it's not enough to change your actions. You got to change how you see yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's deeper than fake it till you make it. It's about realizing, understanding that your habits actually build your identity.
And then your identity reinforces those habits. It's like a loop.
A feedback loop, exactly. And you want to be a writer, you don't wait for inspiration, you write, even if it's garbage.
Because every time you write, you're basically proving to yourself, hey, I am a writer.
You're casting a vote.
Voting for the type of person you want to become.
That's it. And Clear calls this the aggregation of marginal gains. So these tiny improvements, they add up over time, but it all starts with matching your habits to the identity you want.
Okay, so we need to be super clear on who we want to be and then pick habits that actually support that vision. But, like, how do habits actually work? I remember Clear talking about those 4 stages of habit formation.
Ah, yes, the 4 stages. It's a simple framework, but it's powerful. You start with a cue.
The cue,
That triggers a craving,
craving,
which motivates a response,
response,
and then leads to a reward.
reward. So, like, okay, if I see a plate of cookies, that's the cue.
Right. Now, seeing those cookies, they might trigger a craving for that sugary, delicious taste. And that craving, that's what makes you reach for a cookie. That's your response. And the reward, well, it's the taste, the enjoyment you get.
Okay, but it's not always about, like, giving in to temptation, right? Positive habits work the same way.
Totally. Let's say you're trying to start meditating every morning. You could set your alarm earlier, put your medication cushion out where you can see it.
So the alarm, seeing that cushion, those become your cues.
Exactly. Those cues trigger the craving, the desire for peace and quiet.
And that leads to the response, sitting down to meditate. And the reward is, I guess, that feeling of calm and focus.
You got it. The key is to be intentional, you know? Design cues that trigger the responses you want.
I'm starting to get it. So instead of shoving my gym clothes in a drawer, I should leave them out where I can see them.
Make it obvious. That's what Clear says. The more obvious that cue is, the more likely you are to actually start that habit loop. And he goes even further. He argues that, like, our vision, what we see, is the strongest trigger.
He says we're bombarded with visual stuff all the time. Our brains are wired for it.
He has this great line, out of sight, out of mind.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. So you want to break a bad habit, make the cue invisible. You want to build a good one, make it impossible to miss.
Exactly. And you know what else is interesting? This idea that changing your environment can be a huge help.
Because a new environment, it doesn't have all those old triggers, those old cues.
Think about those soldiers returning from Vietnam. Many of them were addicted to heroin. But when they came home back to a totally different environment,
They didn't have those same triggers, so it was easier to kick the habit.
it's like getting a fresh start. So, yeah, creating a separation between your old environment and your new habits, that can be powerful.
It's like hitting the reset button. Okay, this all makes a lot of sense. But, we've talked about willpower, environment, but how do we actually make those positive habits more, I don't know, appealing? Where does that motivation come from?
Well, we can't talk about motivation without talking about dopamine.
Dopamine, like the feel-good chemical.
Exactly. But here's the thing. It's not just released when we experience something pleasurable. It's released in anticipation of it.
Oh, so like it's not just the reward itself, but the excitement leading up to it.
You got it. The more you anticipate that reward, the more motivated you are to take action. And Clear talks about something called temptation bundling. It's kind of a way to hack that dopamine system.
Temptation bundling. Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about that.
So temptation bundling is this idea of like you pair an action you want to do with one you need to do.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say you love podcasts, right? But you struggle to make time for exercise.
That's me, for sure.
So you could bundle them. Only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while you're working out.
Ah, I see. So you're using the podcast, something I want to do, to motivate me to do something I need to do.
You're basically tricking yourself in a good way.
You're using your existing desires to, like, boost the appeal of that less appealing activity.
Exactly. It's about making those good habits enjoyable, even in just a small way.
And that reminds me of Clear's cardinal rule of behavior change, right? The whole what is immediately rewarded is repeated, what is immediately punished is avoided.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
So we've got to find ways to make good habits, I don't know, immediately satisfying.
Which can be tough when you're thinking about those long-term benefits.
Right, they seem so far off.
But there are definitely some things we can do, some strategies.
Like what?
Well, Clear really pushes habit tracking.
Habit tracking. Isn't that like just monitoring your progress? Checking things off a list?
It's more than that.
Oh,
So first of all, it's a visual reminder, right? You see it, you remember to act.
okay, that makes sense.
And it keeps you motivated too, like you actually see your progress.
Seeing it laid out, that could be motivating.
And then you've got that feeling of satisfaction.
When you check something off,
When you record a successful instance of your habit, it taps right into that instant gratification.
so it's like a visual representation of your progress, your commitment, and it gives you those small wins along the way.
Exactly. It can be super powerful.
Sounds like it.
But, and this is important, Clear also says not to get too fixated on a measurement itself.
So like not getting too caught up in the numbers.
Right. Sometimes we focus so much on tracking that we lose sight of the actual goal, you know?
I guess that makes sense.
Like someone trying to get healthy might focus only on the steps they take, instead of like their overall well-being, their sleep, their stress.
So it's about finding that balance between tracking your progress and keeping your eye on the bigger picture.
Exactly. The tracking should be there to help you, to support your goals, not take over, right?
Right.
Now, another piece of this puzzle is accountability.
Yeah, having someone to answer to.
It can be so helpful.
First, like having a workout buddy, somebody to help you stay on track.
And it's more than just like moral support, right? It adds this immediate consequence.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Clear talks about habit contracts where you actually spell out consequences for not following through.
He tells that story about Brian Harris, right, who used to contract with his wife and his trainer to help him lose weight.
Yeah, and the consequences, they were pretty serious, like donating money to a cause he hated.
I remember that. He really put himself on the line.
But it worked. Those consequences, the accountability partners, it helped him stay consistent.
So we don't have to do this alone. Involving others can give us that structure, that extra push.
Absolutely. It's like having your own personal chair squad and a referee.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about making habits attractive, tracking our progress, staying accountable, but, everyone's different.
Of course.
So how do we know which habits are right for US?
That's where Clear's idea of genetics and personality comes in.
So it's not just about copying what worked for someone else.
Right. It's got to be tailored to you, your strengths, your weaknesses.
Makes sense. So how do we figure that out?
Well, he has this concept called the explore-exploit trade-off.
The explore-exploit trade-off.
Basically, in the beginning, you want to explore, try different things, see what sticks.
Okay.
But then, as you learn, you start to identify your strengths, and you shift to exploiting those.
Focus on what you're naturally good at.
Exactly. He uses the example of Scott Adams, the guy who created Dilbert.
Oh, yeah, I love Dilbert.
So Adams, he didn't think he was the best artist or the funniest writer.
But he combined his skills.
Exactly. He had this unique blend of drawing, writing, and business sense, and he used that to create something amazing.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, those areas where you naturally excel.
And really leaning into those. You don't have to be good at everything.
Just got to find your niche, your zone of genius.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about something that everyone struggles with, even with the best habits in place.
What's that?
Motivation. Or rather, the lack of it.
Ugh, yeah, the dreaded motivation slump.
We all have those days where we just don't feel like doing what we're supposed to do, even if we know it's good for us.
You start with all this excitement, but then it fades and you're just blah.
And Clear gets that. He says even the most successful people feel that way sometimes.
So it's normal.
Totally normal. And the key, he says, is to find ways to show up anyway.
Even when you don't feel like it.
Even when you're bored, uninspired, you gotta keep going.
So it's not about feeling motivated all the time.
No, motivation comes and goes. It's fickle. It's about building those systems, those routines that keep you moving forward no matter what.
So we're relying less on willpower, more on structure.
Exactly. It's about creating those habits that are so ingrained they're almost automatic.
I see, that makes sense. But still, how do you keep those habits engaging? How do you fight off that boredom?
Well, Clear suggests incorporating something called variable rewards.
Variable rewards, what are those?
Think about slot machines, right? People keep pulling that lever because they never know when they'll win.
The anticipation keeps them hooked.
It's that element of surprise. So by adding variety into your habit routines, you keep things interesting.
Keeps those dopamine levels up, prevent that boredom from setting in.
Exactly. You got to find that balance between challenge and reward that keeps you engaged.
This is all super helpful, really eye-opening. But, it's not enough to just set habits and forget about them, right? We've got to check in, make sure things are still working.
Absolutely. You got to reflect, review, make adjustments as you go.
It's like a road trip, right? You have a destination, but you got to check the map now then, make sure you're still on track.
Clear talks about Olympic athletes like Eliud Kipchoge and Katie Ledecky. These are people at the very top of their game.
They're already amazing, but they're still checking in.
They track everything, they review their training, they're constantly looking for ways to improve, even just a little bit.
So it's about being mindful, being aware of what's working and what's not.
And tweaking things as needed. It's a continuous process of improvement.
Wow, this is so much more than just like making a to-do list and hoping for the best.
Right. It's about understanding how our brains work, using that to our advantage.
It's about building systems that support our goals.
And it's about small changes, consistent actions. Those are the things that add up over time.
So much good stuff here. We've really gone deep on habits today, haven't we?
We've dug way down past the surface, explored the psychology behind why we do what we do.
I feel like I have a much better understanding now. Really insightful.
Well, hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this deep dive into atomic habits, everyone.
Yeah, it's not about overnight transformations. It's about those small, consistent actions.
And those small actions, those can lead to some pretty remarkable changes.
Absolutely. Speaking of remarkable, we've got one last thought to leave you with, something that really gets to the heart of this whole habit thing. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Ready for that last thought, remember?
All right, so Clear throws out this idea, and it's a bit of a head-scratcher.
It's a big one. Get ready.
He says, happiness is the space between one desire being fulfilled and a new desire forming.
Whoa, that's deep.
It's like a paradox, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We think if we reach our goals, then we'll be happy, but then, boom, new desire pops up.
Right, like we're chasing this moving target.
Always on a treadmill, striving for that next thing.
And it's often the anticipation, the wanting something, that drives us even more than actually getting it.
That makes me think about that habit loop again. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Yeah.
Is Clear saying that the craving, the wanting, that's where the happiness is?
He's saying the desire, that's what kicks off the whole thing, the fuel.
The ignition, yeah.
He says desire initiates the behavior while pleasure sustains it.
So if you don't want something, there's no reason to act.
Exactly, but then if you don't enjoy it, the process or the outcome, you're not going to stick with it either.
It's got to be both wanting it and liking it.
That's the magic combo. That's what keeps that habit loop spinning.
So then how do we use that to build those lasting habits?
Clear has this great line, feeling motivated gets you to act, feeling successful gets you to repeat.
So we need both of those feelings to really make a habit stick.
You got it.
Find the way to enjoy the process, but also feel that sense of accomplishment.
And that brings us back to identity, remember?
Oh yeah, how we see ourselves.
If your habits match your desired identity, you get that sense of pride, of satisfaction.
Makes you want to keep going.
Exactly.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of happiness.
No.
It's about aligning our actions with who we want to be.
And finding ways to enjoy the journey, the ups and downs, all of it.
Well, I think we've covered a lot today, really dug deep into atomic habits.
We went way beyond those surface level tips.
Explored the psychology, the science behind how habits actually work.
So hopefully you all have some new tools, new strategies to try out.
It's not about overnight change. It's about those small, consistent actions.
Those are the things that add up. They lead to those big transformations.
And that's what it's all about, right? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
See you next time.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Hat bet.